sun and clouds. And this hour is brought to you by Aging Issues Management, the law firm of Payne and Con, Dominic's Fine Cigars, and Plug-In Virtual Reality. Great segment there, produced by none other than Jake Schaefer. He's here. He's showing up to work. He's got to get away from that miserable life of his. All righty, let me get to my next guest. Wow, she's going to kill me. She's actually a great gal. All righty, let's get to our next guest. He's the former county executive, now political analyst. Good morning, Andy Spano.
Good morning, Bob.
It's always a pleasure. We just had a couple of restaurateurs in here who are just so much fun, even here in the belly of the beast. How are you?
Okay, I listened to part of that. I heard part of that.
Yeah, well,
I'm not a big ramen fan, but it sounded good.
Oh, it does sound good, except they're obsessed with oxtails, which I guess is an ethnic part of it.
Yeah, oxtail's very good.
Yeah, I know. I've been told. I never had any. I'm one of those people who always gets the same thing, county exec, when I do that. A couple of questions, and I'm so glad to have you, because one of the things that I value in you is you keep things on an even keel. Now, the governor has been getting, and I need to say this, and rightfully so, good marks for how he's handled this. Now, one thing, not that it backfired, I'm trying to put it in the right context, but calling in the National Guard, who, and I say this with all love and peace, it's not that they're going to be here with guns and tanks. They're going to be Uber drivers. They're going to take food to people that need it, and they're going to help clean up and be manpower, people power. But some of the news outlets outside of New Rochelle have butchered it. Did you see the Daily News yesterday?
No, I did not. But, it's Daily News. Come on.
No, but they have. It's like I'm living in an armed camp. Everybody's running around with masks. There were tanks rolling through North Avenue, for God's sakes. And I'm trying to disabuse that and keep it in context. Now, you've been... George is typical George. You got to kick it the other day. I had to work late getting ready for a big show. So I ran over to one of the local restaurants, grabbed a burger, and my sources all of a sudden start beeping me and calling me. George Latimer's up in the belly of the beast having dinner in the North End in the militarized zone. He had dinner. God bless him. He gets everywhere.
No, but I demonstrated, the fact that he feels comfortable.
Yeah,
yeah. These are the kinds of things that politicians have to do, because you want to put the people at ease.
Right.
You don't tell lies. You go do things like that. It's and you have to do it.
No, you do have to.
There was a situation, and the governor. Where the hell is he going to get hundreds of people to do work for him?
Well, right.
Well, he's only got a limited number of things he can do.
Yes, and that's what I understood. But that's why I was so angry with the press for butchering it and creating this.
You can't be angry at anybody anymore. Everyone should just go ahead and do what's right. I'm sitting here. Yesterday I had conversations. We're dealing with the elections in New York State.
Of course.
What happens when the primary day comes around?
Well, we're all wondering about that.
Yeah, well, that was the discussion. Some recommendations have been made, and we'll see how we come out with that, with all of that stuff. But this is serious. And then down the line, the governor can push off, the date on the elections,
on the primary.
But what happens when we get down to November?
It's something that, as a guy that does politics for a living, I'm worried about. But people are going to come out to vote, and that they'll feel comfortable to come out and vote.
Maybe we won't come out and vote. Who the hell knows? That's my point.
Has an election ever been postponed? A national election ever been postponed?
I don't think the national election has ever been postponed. I don't think so. The primary certainly has. 9/11 it was. It wasn't even postponed. It had been already running, and they stopped it.
Well, that's right.
Pushed it off.
Well, so that can be done. How do you view this crisis?
Look, we can probably do anything we want, given what there was no rule on how you get rid of a president or vice president and put the vice president in and that kind of stuff. When Ford was made vice president, they found a way to do that. This is really crazy, and a lot of people not taking this seriously.
Well, I think
the danger has been increased. It has been increased because what has happened is by not having a testing protocol with everything out there, so we know the scope of this, everybody can have conjecture in their mind. We're really safe. They're overblowing it. This is terrible. The whole country's infected and we don't know it, et cetera, et cetera. And your mind is worse than reality.
Always. And that has been what we've been stressing here as well. Because at the end of all of this, most of us are going to continue doing what we were doing without hide nor hair being hurt. And we will have suffered more from anxiety than from the disease, I'm afraid.
I don't think so. I don't think so.
What are you saying?
I don't think so. I think it's going to be worse than you ever imagined.
Well, yes, but for a certain part of the population. But 80% are still going to skate pretty much okay, no?
I think so, but that's not the point. You got, here are ramifications of this. Let's say 20%, okay? 20% of what?
20%.
Is the infected population going to be 50% of the people in the United States?
Well, apropos of that, you heard, I see your point, because apropos of that, Angela Merkel, the Chancellor of Germany, said she believes that 80% of the people in our country will have had this before it's over.
Okay, so there you are.
Yeah, I see your point. So what do we do now? What did we do wrong?
Now, wait, that's the people who are affected.
Right.
Who still have to go to the hospital, maybe. Not be, just because they're sick doesn't mean they're okay. And you go to the hospital, if they have to go to the hospital to be treated and stay there 3, 4, 5 days, whatever the hell it is, till they get better, you're going to overwhelm the hospital system. You overwhelm the hospital system. What happens to the guy with a heart attack? What happens to the people that have all kinds of other diseases?
Your point.
I mean, you go on and on with things like this. And that's what's happening, by the way, in Italy. So, it's not like I'm talking off the top of my head.
Of course. Well, you never do, frankly. Former County Executive Andy Spano, what did you think of the president's speech last night?
I was glad he went on. I think he made people who didn't listen to the words very carefully feel better.
Yes.
And people who don't think this is going to be as serious as it's going to be. But it didn't address the real problem here, which is what is going to happen, what is the possibility, and what am I doing really to make sure that this doesn't happen to you, especially if you lose your job and don't get paid, can't get food, et cetera, et cetera. I was in Costco yesterday. There were empty shelves.
Yes, we got a report of that earlier today as well. Yes, sir.
Okay, I mean, so I'm looking at it. The woman in front of me's got 2 wagons filled to the brim, and I'm talking to her, and she said, my daughter and my son-in-law are working, so I had to shop for everybody because we're getting ready. I talked to the guy behind me, and he says, these people are crazy. He says, this is only a way to sell newspapers. I loved it. In that little 3-person conversation, that's what I had.
Well, you had some people on Fox News saying this is a Democratic hoax, for God's sakes.
Well, I think what everyone has to do is ignore what everyone is saying and do what they have to do.
Which is why
I said to him, I'm down in Florida right now. I was supposed to come up for some meetings. I was on with the meetings. I can't fly up.
Nope.
I mean, they told me people my age shouldn't fly. And
people
so
your age shouldn't walk. I'm sorry. I couldn't let it go, Andy. Forgive me. Yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Forgive me, God. Go ahead. Andy Spano, our guest. Go ahead, sir.
I felt more comfortable with Cuomo than I feel down here.
Oh, I think that's been a general acceptance. Cuomo has really done. I think this is one of the high points of his administration. But having said that,
doesn't listen to me. Well, last point. It doesn't matter exactly what he does. What matters is that he's doing it.
Yes. Now, what about it? Let's take a look. Lay it out all in front of you. What needs to be done? Take sort of a blank a sketchboard? What needs to be done? How do we balance panic versus people? You said people need to do what they need to do. What is that?
Well, first of all, they should take all the advice that's been given. They should wash their hands. They
Yep.
should avoid large gatherings. They shouldn't go to places where they might be infected. They shouldn't be touching things, all over the place. They should try to live there, and they try to keep space between them and other people.
Mm-hmm.
They really should try to do that. Now I'm supposed to go to a Yankee game today, and I'm when the spring games,
Mm-hmm.
spring games. I don't know if and it's with my brother, and I'm saying to myself, I gotta think this. But if I go, what am I gonna do? Am I gonna sit? How am I gonna, And I'm saying to myself, can you imagine what I'm thinking? That's because I don't know anything.
Well, this is true.
In South Korea, okay, I forget what they're doing. I think it's 60,000 tests a day.
Because they have a drive-in testing capability. I don't know if you read that. Well, there's
Well,
like you
we
go to
would too. We would too if we had the tests. I mean, we can make deals with, CBS and Walgreens and all those places and do drive-in tests. We can make things like that with McDonald's and everybody else if we had the test.
You make a point. We had a doctor on earlier today who said the biggest problem that she has with all of this is that we haven't done an assessment of communities to test enough people to know how prevalent the virus actually is.
Well, let me give you the difference. The assessment right now, and this is Kentucky windage. You know what that means?
Yeah, I sure do.
Look, and is about 3.5%.
Yes.
Would be infected and die. In South Korea, because they've done the testing, it is below 1.
Wow.
So they know that. But they have been doing other things to keep everyone safe for a long time. We're doing nothing. We're doing practically nothing.
Why do you think we didn't? And look, I'm loath to criticize executives of all stripes, from president down to mayors, because you spend your money on what you think you need, and maybe you get caught off by these things you think are low probabilities. But what should we have been doing all along to be, let's say, where South Korea is?
Well, first of all, you have to take it very seriously. You have to listen to experts. You have to talk to them and see what they're saying. You can't as county executive, and I call, whatever the thing was, West Nile, whatever it is.
Yes.
I listen to my people who are the experts. Who are you talking to? You're talking to the state guys,
Yes.
talk to them. And then you make decisions based on that. You don't say, no, I got a feeling that this is really not that bad, and I'm going to, It's always better safe than sorry. You got a hurricane coming tomorrow morning. It's reality, okay? You got a hurricane coming tomorrow morning with a offshore situation coming in on my Mamaroneck, and you got 2 rivers overflowing on the other side. And if it happens, it isolates Mamaroneck, and they all get. So you call an evacuation, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're sitting there and you say, do you call the evacuation? And if nothing happens, you'll look like a fool.
Well, yes.
And you sit there and you say, okay, what's it? So you're the highest percentage of this, the highest percentage of that, and you say, screw it, I'm calling the evacuation. I'll live with it. I'd rather be wrong that way than be wrong the other way. And then you take a hit for it if nothing happens. So, those are the decisions you make. Those are the decisions the president has to make. Now, on the other hand, if you make that decision and nothing happens, politically you take a big hit.
Well, it's so unfair,
And
but it is what it is.
all right. So you get this situation, and you sit there and you say to yourself, "Wow, oh shit, I'm not doing this. Holy cow, I'm gonna sort of tempt." So the guy says, "Make sure you don't scare people." Yeah, you don't scare people. You don't scare people by making the people understand you got it controlled, but you don't lie to them.
Well,
The way you don't scare people it's like a kid. I don't want to go on that ride. I don't want to. I'm afraid. I'm afraid. Come on, honey. I'll go on with you, and we'll sit there and so on. Kid goes on the ride. The ride's still scary, but now he feels comfortable with the scare, and that's the job of the political person.
now, I thought, and again, I think you said it well before. I thought the president coming on calling for bipartisanship yesterday was a good thing. I know that a lot of things need to be clarified, how the money will be used, and at first he was kind of almost reading, but I thought he did a pretty decent job last night. But the details need to follow, don't they?
Yeah, but that's out of context.
Yes.
If you put it into context, everything he said was different from what he had said before that.
That's true. Absolutely.
So now it's hard to believe him. So it doesn't have the effect. If you get on and you say, well, I thought it was this way, so I did this and this, but, now I've been convinced, I see that the way we see it's more than that. So, I didn't get this right, but I got that right, and let's go on.
See, the way
changes the whole picture.
Well, yeah, but see, the way I had seen it is that the president was kind of, the president is not a very articulate guy and was attempting to not panic people, but inadvertently came off like he was trying to dismiss it. Isn't that a fair statement?
It may be. It may be. He's not articulate. Well, he's also not that bright, which is a whole other problem. He's clever, but he's not that bright.
It's like the Godfather.
And he certainly doesn't. He certainly doesn't take into account. He doesn't look for details. He doesn't look for information. It's okay to dismiss information if you get it all and listen to it.
Andy, if we do the best we can, the president's on board, the governor's on board, the local authorities do what they have to do. What, in your view, give us the overview. What should the chief executives of all stripes, A, be doing, and B, some people are just going to have to be brave about this. I mean, the world needs to keep running. We need police, fire, hospitals, broadcasting, whatever. Where's the sweet spot here?
Well, I love this. Everybody thinks that the world runs because God made it that way.
Right, but that's not so.
God didn't make it. God didn't make it that way.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care how long the Roman Empire lasted. It's not here now. And what people have to understand is what we've made because we operated in a certain way. And people have sort of agreed on it. I mean, the Constitution of the United States doesn't force us to do something. It's a couple of pieces of paper. What forces us, why we do things is because over the years we've all agreed this is the way we're going to act. That could change in a moment. That could change in a moment, and then you have no control. If you have hospitals that can't take in, like China did, couldn't take another patient or send them home, and people died in their homes. No one got treated. But over there, hey, you lose 50. I think it's probably more like 50 to 100,000 in China. They're not saying that. But what is that with 1,500,000,000 people? So, and a government that really doesn't care about 50,000, 100,000 people, especially if they're not party people. People have to understand that just because they've lived a certain way, look at the stock market.
Go ahead.
Look at the stock market. It goes up and down. It has a thing like that. Oh yeah. This is real. Here's what I think should happen. Certainly, the testing that people should be told what the possibilities are, but people are around it. And when the president says, and we're talking to everybody, and we got everybody on board, the people he says that are on board say, yeah, he's on board. He's been communicating with all the governors. He's been doing this. He's been doing that. I really appreciate what they've been doing. That
Mm-hmm.
makes us feel comfortable. Then we got to do testing. We got to test everybody.
Yes.
So it's like It's like an activity. Just the activity is worthwhile. It
Yes.
it keeps us thinking everybody knows what they're doing. Now we're getting more accurate information.
So
I just and then we've got to look at our medical system. We got to prioritize. Who comes in, who comes out. We've got to why is Korea, South Korea testing with drive-ins? Because they don't have to test now in hospitals and other places. Those people don't have to go near a hospital or doctor's office. They stay away so there's room for the patients that have to be there. And so on and so forth. I don't see any of that here, and that's my pride. And the example you have to have is South Korea versus Italy. Italy did what we're doing, and they paid the price.
why do you think South Korea was able to get it right? Is it the?
Well, South Korea is a very sophisticated country.
Of course, we know that it's very sophisticated.
It has one of the best public technology communication systems in the world. It's a smaller country, and whoever was in charge took it seriously. They're right next door to China. You know what I mean? The Far East is a hot spot. They had a lot of cases immediately, and they jumped all over them.
How much of it is the political system? I go back to when I was traveling a lot in Europe in the 90s, and they had at that time, towards the end of the 90s, a much more sophisticated and efficient cell phone system because their markets are slightly different. They weren't, for example, we let the competitors, and it worked out price-wise, but the competitors had one another's throats here in the different systems, and so they didn't talk to one another. So theirs worked better first. How much of it is a different political system where they can do things with a lot less, let's say, political strife as they implement?
No, that's a bad. That's why China can get its hands around certain things. I mean, because there you say, you do this, you do that, you do this. I mean,
Yes.
Cuomo said just the other day, yesterday, I heard him say, he said, well, I can't order people to do that, but, I
Right.
would prefer they, that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So that is a problem. But that's why you have emergency powers.
Yes.
So you can declare an emergency, okay, and then do what you have to do.
But isn't it also why you shouldn't make emergency declarations that are spurious as well? It's frivolous. If you
what you have is a problem right now. There's I don't know how many billion, maybe 40 billion sitting there for this kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
That needs no congressional approval. All it needs is an emergency declaration by the president, and he hasn't made it. And one reason he hasn't made it is because he doesn't want to give that kind of impression to the people. And he has an emergency declaration for that wall still sitting there.
Now, what about the economy? How bad a hit do you think we're going to take, Andy Spano? And Andy Spano is our guest, former county executive, now political analyst. And then before you go, I want to ask you about Biden.
Rather than talk about the economy, I'd like to say if I am correct or semi-correct,
Yes.
what we're going to see after this is over, and it will be over, and it might be over with few deaths, whatever it's going to be. You're going to see changes in many things.
In fact,
how we educate.
Hold that thought, because I was just going to ask you, good, believe it or not, as I'm sure you were about to tell us, good always comes from these things. Changes to how we pay for medical care, changes in the way we structure it. What do you see evolving out of this? What was my last question?
Number one, the medical system is going to have a close look. That'll be part of I'm sure, the presidential campaign. And now, I wasn't a big fan of Medicare for all, because I didn't think there's a possibility in the near future, right, to get it passed. But if we had Medicare for all right now, we wouldn't be dealing with certain questions about this. Who's going to pay for what, and how's it going to be? And it would be, Medicare could control a lot of what was happening out there.
Mm-hmm.
That would be one thing. So I think you're going to get a big look at that. I think you're going to get a big look at education, because as all of these places go out, and they're all going on, digital learning at
learn
home.
at home and such. Sure.
Yeah, there are going to be people who wouldn't do it before who will find that it works, and they'll be experimenting now with what's best and what's so, because they have to. It's not voluntary anymore. They have to. And I think that's going to change a lot of how we educate and what we do in terms of education, what we do in terms of our colleges. I mean, you got a college you're paying $60,000 a year for. Your kid goes home now. You're still paying you $60,000, right? You don't realize this. The college isn't saying we're giving you $60,000 back. They're saying we're going to keep you $60,000. We're going to educate you online. Maybe what are they going to do with the money that was paid for the dorms and they sent them home?
Oh yeah, you're even going to have this even at something like pro sports. If they cancel games, people got to get their money back.
Maybe. And how about the athletes themselves?
Yeah.
What are they all going to get paid for the rest of the season?
The contracts,
$40 million, $50 million.
The contracts say they should.
Yeah, I understand. But the reality is, it's just like, your union say, we need a raise. I'm a big union person, right? Yes. And you look at your balance sheet, and where are you going to get the money? The contract can say whatever it says, just like your mortgage says. And if you can't pay your mortgage, you lose your house. So, and then the bank doesn't get the money. Gets the house, but it doesn't get the money. Although the one thing that's good, the banks are in good shape. They've taken care of themselves.
Yes, they have. And a lot of them bought back their stock, which is they're taking a beating on now, though.
Yeah.
Andy Spano.
I just think that people ought to take this seriously. That's all.
I think that's the right message, and I want to give you a moment before I segue out to my next guest. If you could, as someone who's been the chief executive of this county for as many years as you are and in public service, what's the last thought you want to leave people with right now, Andy Spano?
I think most of government is trying to do the right thing, and that at this particular point, it's important that people take this as their top priority relating to this. And they assist in any way they can, small or large, to make sure things, get better for them and their families.
Well, one can hope. Andy Spano, thank you very much, and thank you for adding all this context to this difficult problem. And please, if and when you do travel safely, and we'll talk to you again soon. Thank you so much.
Okay. Take care.
Andy
Bye.
Spano, everybody. All righty, in a minute we're going to come back. We're only running 2 minutes late. That's not too bad, but with everything going on, we're going to go to our 9 o'clock long-form guest in just a moment. Right now it is 9:08, and we're going to talk with our friends from Choice. But first, we do have to give you the weather one more time. And the weather is brought to you exclusively by United Hebrew of New Rochelle, voted one of America's best rehabilitation and senior care campuses, and it's right here in New Rochelle. And it's going to get up to about 46 today. It's 41 right now. Actually, it's going to get up to the mid-50s, but we'll have some rain tonight. Rain into the morning, heavy at times in the morning, but giving way in the afternoon to temperatures in the mid-60s. That will be nice. And on into Saturday, we'll have temperatures as well in the mid-50s, low 60s. So a couple of pleasant days ahead after we get through the rain showers tonight and tomorrow morning. And our long-form interview is brought to you by pluginvirtualreality.com, Dominic's Fine Cigars. Dominic's Fine Cigars, licensed retailer with a big selection, including Arturo Fuente, Padres, and more. Dominic's Fine Cigars, located on Boston Post Road in Larchmont. The law firm of Pena and Kahn and Aging Issues Management. And joining our lineup, the very fine restaurant Beachmont Tavern over across from Iona. And we kind of come to calling this the Choice Hour. As you know, Choice is a wonderful organization that helps get the homeless off the street. If they can, gets them help, gets them benefits, gets them job training, gets them health and wellness resources if that's what they need, including drug treatment, psychiatric care, and so forth. And our guest, and I have it right here, I just want to be sure I get it right, the young lady's just to come in, and Pauline Harris, I'm going to ask you to get about a fist away from the mic, and we're going to turn your mic on, and I will introduce you further. Good morning.
Good morning.
Get a little closer.
Better?
Yeah, much better.
Okay,
We like that. Okay, let me tell you a little bit about Pauline. She is, and I just had it here. Now, AOT coordinator, what's that mean, AOT?
Assisted Outpatient Treatment Coordinator.
Okay, Assistant Outpatient Treatment. Currently, she said, Pauline Harris, she works with Choice in the case management services area as an assistant outpatient treatment manager. She's able to provide a wide variety of assistance to those who are dealing with homelessness, mental illness, and legal issues, i.e. court-ordered mental health services. She's also worked with the Department of Special Education in Mamaroneck. She has developed the skills that allow her to provide a positive and successful outcome for children and adults who are faced with emotional and behavioral disabilities. And she's received a BLA degree in psychology and social work from the College of New Rochelle. And she's had the opportunity of completing many courses involving psychology and social work. And she also has a pretty solid knowledge of the criminal justice system. Please welcome, without further ado, Pauline Harris. Pauline is how you pronounce it?
Yes, Pauline is how you pronounce
Welcome to the program. Now, do you work up here in the New Rochelle office?
it. I originally started in the Rochelle office. I've been recently transferred to the White Plains office.
Okay, well, welcome, and I want you to
Thank you.
just be yourself. As you know, I'm a full disclosure. I'm a member of your board as well, but
Okay.
I got involved with Choice many years ago when we first introduced them to radio. They had a regular show on WVOX where I used to
Okay.
work, and as Guy and the board and the team built your organization. I'm always amazed at the people who come in here from Choice and what you do. First of all, a little more about you. Where'd you grow up?
I grew up here in the Rochelle.
God bless you. And by the way, now that do you still live here?
No, I actually recently moved to Scarsdale.
Excuse me. No, but as you can see, you probably thought when you came down here, people were running around the streets. What am I going to do? Everything is fine.
Yes.
I mean, it's a little empty, but it's fine. Despite that daily news cover, did you see that yesterday?
Yes.
It made it look
I
like
did.
we were under siege. Tanks were rolling
It
through
made
the
it look
street.
like New Rochelle was a bad place to be, and it's definitely not.
Right.
It's a great place to be, great place to visit. Unfortunately, there's, some circumstances that's out of our control, but
Right.
nevertheless, this is definitely somewhere you would actually want to come, and you feel welcomed here.
Oh God, yeah, it is even now, and hopefully you feel welcomed here. What drove you to get into this kind of career? Psychology, social work, criminal justice. Why you, Pauline?
Well, when I first started, like I said, I was special education trained. I have a passion for helping people, and working with Choice gave me the opportunity to extend the help that I'm able to provide. A lot of my clients are court ordered, so they're mandated to do certain things, and it's a great pleasure when you see them through that process and they graduate and they're able to become productive on their own.
Now, is that a specialty for you? We've had some of your colleagues come in here. They intervene right there on the street, or they handle a case that walks in, and they're looking to get them food and a Metro card and cleaned up, and then either an overnight stay place, a homeless shelter, or maybe into permanent housing. But is yours more specific to people who've been court mandated?
Yes.
Okay. Tell us about the typical person that's been court mandated.
So the typical person that will end up court mandated are those who have frequent hospitalizations for mental health purposes, non-compliance to taking their medication, which causes.
That's a huge problem, at least from what we read in the press.
It is. You have some people who are still in denial that, mental health is a serious issue. And because they refuse to take their medication, they're not acting according to society's norms. So they become, outcasts. So with the court order, they get their treatment, they get their medication, they're monitored. So it's easier to understand, their baseline, where they are. So when they are out of, I say baseline, you're able to provide assistance to them in a much faster way.
Now, of course, as you know, I'm sure better than us, than we do, there are all kinds of mental illnesses.
Yes.
And some, if a person isn't medicated, they don't have any insight into the fact that they're behaving the way they behave.
Absolutely.
And then you have the more neurotic but still serious illnesses of depression and massive anxiety and things like that. They have insight, but also sometimes that insight comes late.
Absolutely.
What's most typical for what you handle?
I would have to say they have the insight that there is a mental illness, but they're not accepting that it's happening to them.
Now, why has their help been court-ordered?
Because they've been hospitalized frequently.
Okay.
And even in the hospitals, they're refusing to take medication.
Do we know why?
No, we don't. My professional opinion about it goes with education.
No, but that line, if I may, if I'm not in trouble when I'm taking my medication, if I feel better. Now, I know, particularly the antipsychotic medications, the Thorazines, the Melorils, they knock a person on their butt, and it mutes them,
Yes.
Which is the best way I can put it. There is that, but that's still a far cry better than what they must experience, whether it's in schizophrenic case, hearing voices and acting out.
It all depends on how long they've been actually dealing with the mental illness, because for some of them, they see it as normal behavior.
That's what I was getting at.
Yeah. So it's hard for them to differentiate what's normal and what's not. And for them, if they've been non-medicated for a long period of time, in their mind, their behaviors and their actions are normal. So they feel, who are you to tell me this is not okay when I've been doing this all my life? But then you have them when they do get medicated and they are getting the proper treatment, they start to realize that, okay, maybe some of the things that I was doing was not at the right things to do.
Well, go ahead.
But then some, that you have some who just don't like the medication itself because it's of chemical base and not of natural base.
Well, that's I'm saying it's silly, but it's silly of me to say that as well, because you mentioned, and I want to go back to that, education. Now, I'm sure you have people who, speaking of education in the more literal sense, well-educated college grads who suffer from schizophrenia or real serious depression or the worst development, when I say developmental disabilities, because it's almost baked into their DNA in that case. They are well-educated. They're smart. What is the education then that they need? What is it that they need to understand? What insight needs to be inculcated there?
The insight of mental health disease and how it affects you mentally, physically, emotionally. Some people lack that education on the differences and how to detect it. It's one thing to have the college degree, but if you've never took time to get to know someone who is suffering from bipolar disorder or schizophrenia, you really don't have the insight on how it affects a person.
Yeah.
So being educated on mental illnesses.
I got you. So it's the public at large. Now, what about the patient? What education do they need? Or are you talking more about the public and the people that deal with it, such as yourself?
I'm talking about both, honestly. The public, because you have some people in the public who, because they don't understand mental health illnesses, it's like, for, a lack of good words, oh, you have the cooties, or, oh, you're different. Which they're not really different. They're just dealing with different things.
I can't help but share my own experience. One of the reasons I got involved in Choice was because of my own struggle with serious depression. And I remember before I realized I had a problem, the most insightful thing I remember, I spent 4 hours trying to reinterpret a sentence in a book. And it seemed perfectly normal to me when I was doing it. It seemed perfectly normal to me that I was agitated and talking real fast and obsessing. as if I'm obsessing because this is what's bothering me. Not that there's something also wrong, brain chemistry, whatever it is. So, but that's on the scale of 3. You've got people with 10s, with personality disorders, developmental disorders, and the psychotic illnesses where they have much less insight. So you get it across to the public, but still you're there, and John Doe or Jane Doe either comes in off the homeless heap, if you will, or comes in as court ordered. How do you start?
My first initial interaction with a client.
And by the way, if I may, are they
ahead.
usually homeless, which I know is one of the reasons death trials, but you also deal with people who just need help from getting out of jail or from a court ordered. What are the ones that you see?
I see them all.
Okay.
So I get the
Give
court
me
ordered out of the hospital.
Yes.
I get the court ordered coming from jail. And then I get some that are homeless who are in need of more services.
Okay, and because I just want to back up a second, because you know what I worry about in what you do in terms of achieving success? Even now, and this applies to all of the above, and maybe just, I shouldn't say just, but the person who's heavily clinically depressed, and they're clinically depressed, and they've screwed up a million things in their lives, are not unlike a drug addict. And so in addition to not getting well, they may think so badly of themselves that they have no will to get well. And I know I'm throwing a lot of problems at you because I'm trying to get the people outside to feel perhaps what you feel. The personality disordered person almost never gets better in certain ways, but they
Absolutely.
can behave a little better. The psychotic, properly treated, can be better. The depressive can be treated, but then you have to deal with a lot of therapy to get them to want to be well.
Absolutely.
You got this whole, and I'm just setting this up for you. I'm throwing out the snowballs. You got to catch them. So, what's the typical person that comes to you?
Typical person for me is someone who lacks the education on mental illness.
Of themselves.
Of
So
themselves.
no insight
So
into their own problem.
Exactly. They don't quite understand why things are happening the way that they're happening in their lives, nor do they understand how to correct this behavior.
Now, do you get, when the court orders it, do you have a diagnosis to look at?
Yes.
Okay.
So most of the time when I get that paperwork, I go through it first before I even meet with the client, just so that I can have an understanding on how to approach. So, and then when I meet with the client, before we go right into treatment services and, here's what you need to do, I try to get to know them as a person, to know their likes and dislikes, because I don't want to say something that might cause a trigger behavior for them or put them in a more depressive state because I didn't use the right verbiage. And then, I introduce...
I'm so glad you said that. Oh. No, you have no idea. And this isn't about me, it's about what you do, but just to share it with people. When I was ill, that's 40 years ago now, I was going through that stage where impressionable would be the least way to put it. I would believe anything you told me. If you used the wrong word, it's like a form of massive psychological hypochondria.
Yes.
If you said that, Bob, you ought to go kill yourself, I might have. If you said that, what a horrible human being you are, or as opposed to, gee, you have a problem, if you said something that was at all pejorative, I'd have believed it. I just want to share that with everybody. Continue, please.
So, and then, I'll introduce the different treatments that they are obligated to fulfill. And I always try to encourage them to, be open, speak what you feel, let me know what's bothering you, how I can help you. I don't want this to be a one-sided relationship. I need to know what you're going through so that I can help you through it. And, working with Choice, having a lot of the supervisors and, explain to me certain things, people who's been in the field so much longer, it makes it easier to correspond with my clients in a way that they feel comfortable.
Yeah, but you see, your psychology background, folks, that's why it's so important, and that's why if you're going to deal with the mentally ill, you have to be properly trained.
Yes.
One wrong word, and
verbiage
that
is
person
everything
will
in this field.
obsess on that word.
Yes.
Forever.
Yes.
And
it can be a small thing as to you should only wear red sneakers.
Yeah, absolutely. Please, I'm telling you, I got to go back to myself. I remember the first time a doctor gave me medication, and I was one of these kids that was brought up very strict. And I cried myself to sleep saying to myself, I'm a drug addict. I'm a drug addict. And I never taken a pill before. I'm a drug addict. And I couldn't shake it out of my head no matter what I did because just the simple act of taking medication.
Yes.
I get, but again, I had the underlying depression, which made me think that way.
Absolutely.
So how do you deal with that? How do you keep the lesser patients like I was and the more serious? How do that's a tightrope.
It is. It is. It's.
And how do you get them to take their meds?
I try to outline the positivity that comes when they're taking their medication and they're able to function in a normal society. A lot of my clients, they have the underlying depression where they like to stay sheltered. So I try to introduce them to things that are out in the community or, to talk about things with them that is part of the community just to make them feel comfortable enough to say, you know what, hey, let me check out the arts and crafts down the street or let's go to sometimes I don't even meet them at their home. Sometimes I'll meet them at like Dunkin' Donuts or like the smoothies places just to break the ice of being secluded
and coming
because
back
of
out.
their.
And what if they're socially phobic, true socially phobic or agoraphobic? You got to deal with that too.
Yes.
How do you get them out of the house? And medication
Slowly.
has to be a part of it.
Just slowly. First, you discuss the benefits of being on medication, and you let them know that while they're on the medication, it helps them to be able to deal with different people. And then, for the most part, you just move slowly. You don't rush them into coming out of their home. You say, okay, hey, how about we go sit on the stoop? We're not leaving your front door, but we're just going to go out and get a breath of fresh air. And you let them dictate the next step. Hey, can we take a walk to the store on the corner? Sure. You have to gradually introduce things into their life so that it's not overwhelming or it doesn't cause triggered behaviors and then the depression gets worse.
We're talking with Pauline Harris. She's the AOT coordinator at Choice of New York, Case Management Services, and assistant outpatient treatment manager. And she deals almost specifically with those that are court-ordered for help. Now, are most of your patients homeless or not?
No.
Okay, they're not homeless.
No.
They've been court-ordered.
They've been
So
court-ordered.
at least you know that they have a roof over their head.
Yes, exactly.
Your job is to get them to take their meds. And now, what about the psychotic? And I don't mean that in any terrible way, but the schizophrenic would be more specific, who either hears voices or when they are in their full state. When you get them on medication and that episode subsides, do they have any insight into what they did? Or do they remember it?
Sometimes. It all depends on.
I mean, like I realize they don't snap back overnight, but what's that like? And again, did they remember it?
I don't think they remember it on their own, but it's a conversation that I have to have with them to allow them to understand what happened when they were fully medicated to what happened when they were not medicated. Sometimes they grasp what I'm saying to them, and then sometimes they have this blank look on their face like, that never happened, or, so you can tell by their reactions how far to go with the conversation. And if you see that they become agitated or frustrated because they see people and they know people are perceiving them to be a certain way, and in their heart, that's not how they actually feel that they are, I tend to back off and just go into a different conversation just so that it doesn't make them feel bad about themselves.
Well, right. Yeah, well, how much is educating them that, yes, you do go to this place where you're not aware of your behavior? Are they shocked?
Sometimes, yeah.
What does a success look like? Particularly, let's go down the avenue of psychosis and schizophrenia, and then maybe we'll take a look at the bipolar.
Success is when you can actually get them to acknowledge that there's a mental illness and be comfortable enough to take the medication and voice their concerns and their feelings about the medication.
What's the biggest concern you get?
My biggest concern is not when they're not taking their medication, not the fear that they're going to hurt someone, but the fear that someone might hurt them due to a lack of understanding of the mental illness disease.
You know, it's kind of interesting, that movie. I'm sure you must have seen it if you didn't. Deals with this a little bit. The Joker. Did you see it?
Yes.
Because he's terribly mistreated for, at least the way it presents, relatively mild at first. That's going to happen now. So you're worried that they might hurt someone else. You're worried that they might hurt themselves. Okay, but if it's a success, what has happened? What has changed? A, B, what about the consequences that you are able to employ, such as, you know, if you don't go on your medication, the court's going to put you back in jail or they're going to put you back in a mental hospital.
That's something that I kind of reiterate to them on, periodically, just for them to be aware of the consequences of violating their AOT order. Noncompliance is a big issue.
What's ALT mean?
Assisted Outpatient Treatment Coordinator.
Got it.
So
Okay.
it's when you're non-compliant, I monitor and I report to the county as well. Here's what John Doe is doing. When I met with them, because I meet with them 4 times monthly. So every week I see them just to assess their, behaviors, their demeanor, everything that they're doing. And after working with them over a long period of time, you can kind of tell where they are, if they're baseline or if they're decompensating. And I just kind of go over the AOT order with them and say, these are your expectations. If you don't comply to these expectations, I have no other choice but to have you, hospitalized for evaluation, because I don't want you to get yourself into a situation where it becomes criminal.
Okay.
Because sometimes you have, the police department who are not trained in mental illness, so they don't really understand that the client is not acting out because they want to be, disobedient or defiant. It's something that they can't control. So I try to keep them aware of the stipulations of their AOT order to avoid going down that road
Does it
again.
work?
Sometimes, and then sometimes it doesn't, because I feel like it doesn't work when the client doesn't really want to accept that there is a mental illness.
And it's so hard for me to, in other words, they think their behavior is normal.
Yes.
Now, this is a question that is not in any way a moral judgment. It has to do with the dynamic. Does that person enjoy when do they like life better when they're in that state?
I don't think it's about them liking life better. I think they feel like they're in control.
Interesting, but they're not.
But they're not. But they can't differentiate the behavior. So for them, it's normal behavior for them. So that means they're in control of the things they do and say.
I know of a case, and again, we're talking with Pauline Harris from Choice. Her job there is dealing with people who've been court ordered to take their medications or wind up either hospitalized or imprisoned. I know of a case, and this is not, what I'm going to say is not a real story, but it's based on a real story, because I in no way want to point to that person. But I know of a case where a person's developmentally disabled, and fortunately they come from a rich family, so they pay a nurse to go there every day and make sure he takes his meds. Now, you can't do that.
No.
If you could, how much of a difference would that make?
I think it would make a tremendous difference because I'm able to monitor the medication. Most of the time when we discuss medication, I get information from the doctors, to let me know that the levels is where they need to be if the client has taken the medication consistently.
How long are you with that patient now? Okay, so you can't do that. So you see them 4 times. When can you let them go? When can you say this person can live on their own, or are they constantly under your watch?
It's not really just me. It's a team of
Right,
people.
of course.
So what we do is we try to, we monitor and we see, okay, we know that part of the patient's inability to take their medication is they're missing their appointments or they're not catching up, with their doctor's appointments and things of that nature. So once they become consistent with, making their appointments and making sure that they advocate for themselves or inform me or a colleague of mine, when their medication is running low, when they start doing things, unfortunately, this is sad to say, but when they start acting in a way that is society's norm, then you can say to yourself and then to them, okay, progress has been made. So instead of coming directly off of AOT, we'll go to a step down, which is ESP, which is an
What does that mean?
enhanced service package.
Okay.
Whereas it's less than the AOT because it's not court mandated, but it is an agreement between the client and their care team that the client agrees to continue with their medication, continue with their treatment until, everything is okay. So it's like giving someone your word.
Okay.
And
Now, and does anyone track them after that?
I do. I continue with them until they are officially graduated from the ESP program.
And how long does that generally take?
It can go anywhere from 6 months to a year.
Now, after a year, and you may not know this because you're not tracking them anymore, what is the statistical likelihood that someone who's successful after that year is going to continue to be?
Well, I can honestly say I have one client, I won't use his name, but I do have one client who has graduated from AOT and the ESP program, and he's doing wonderful.
Now, I'm using three. Of course, there's a panoply of illnesses in there. Maybe I'll use four. You've got the developmentally disabled, the schizophrenic, the bipolar, the depressive, and then woven in there are other issues of personality disorders and so forth. Where does this person fit?
The schizoaffective.
Okay, schizoaffective. Okay, so
Yes.
they're the person that when they're there, they don't even know that they're there.
But when he's good, he's great.
What about, because I worked with some people at my old job. One guy was well aware that he was a schizophrenic, a brilliant guy. And when he went there, it wasn't the same guy. But so if he took his meds, he was fine. Now what about bipolar? One of the senses I get, and this is someone very sensitive to mental illness, believe me, I wrote a book about it and everything, what happened with me. Now, what about that? What about the bipolar? Do we use that as a throw-in too much? Do we, if I have one more person come to me whose kids acts out or doesn't behave well, he's probably bipolar. It annoys me because these are specific things. How can you diagnose a true bipolar, and what's it like dealing with that? Because medication can help them, can it not?
I don't think it's a true bipolar. I think it's like you said, it's more of a piece that's part of the pie that was just taken out.
Yeah, thank you.
It's not. It's hard to determine if you're actually bipolar because it could be part of a personality disorder.
Yes.
It could be part of oppositional defiance disorder. So whereas when you're medicated, you're doing what you're told, and you're making the right choices. And when you're not medicated, I'm not making the right choices.
Because I remember, and again, I can only go to my own reference. When I first got sick, I was very, very agitated and very hyper, and so there was very early on the propensity to misdiagnose me as bipolar, and they wanted to put me on Mellaril. But that's only because that was my reaction to the massive anxiety and the depression.
Exactly.
But then I developed a more classical case of depression. So it wasn't bipolar, it was unipolar. So how do you make those decisions, and how can you get access to shrinks to help you? I'm talking about the MDs because it's they who will prescribe the medication. How do you get, because that's where you get into the defined issue, or maybe it's a person who has, maybe they have, what's so common among people that have been abused, borderline personality, but they also have depression thrown in.
I think the first
What a
thing
tough
that
job
they
you
do
have.
is address the behaviors. Once the behaviors are addressed, it's easier to figure out what else is going on.
Now, how hard is it to get a bipolar person, a true bipolar person, on the program and get them seeing it?
It's very
they can
hard.
go out and spend their life savings one week, and the next week want to kill themselves.
It's
Or the next 3
very
months.
hard.
Yeah.
It can be a sticky situation because you don't want to force them into believing that they're bipolar or they're schizophrenic, but you want to open the door so that they can see the difference of their behaviors and how it affects their social life and their family life. Because they're up and down on so many occasions, it's hard to make relationships and, get them to be productive.
Well, but now, again, I don't know what the latest is in that field, but in terms of people who are bipolar, and again, when they get manic, can spend all their life savings and go the other route. we know, though, generally that those medications do work, do they not?
Yes.
And so at least that person ought to have some insight. Of course, when they're feeling good, they don't care.
Right.
You know, because
Absolutely.
I can climb Mount Everest tomorrow and go down and have a cigarette. So that's got to be the toughest part. So my guess is, do you have to intervene when they're at the depressive stage, or
Yes,
what?
I do. I tend to reach out to, the county AOT and the care team, which are the psychiatrists, the social workers, just to see, their thoughts on how we should proceed. Most of the time for me, I try to steer clear from hospitalizations because I think sometimes it's a trigger for the client. So if we can get them to, attend treatment often, more, instead of their weekly treatment, try to double up their sessions just to help them through whatever it is that is causing them to feel out of place. Because that's what happens when their behaviors and everything are out of whack. They feel out of place.
Hold on just a moment.
Sure.
We have some breaking news. All right, folks, we just got some breaking news. Given the stock market, trading has halted on the New York Stock Exchange and the NASDAQ. That's the second time this week that they did that. As soon as we have more information, we will share it with you. But we just got that from one of our news sources. They've stopped trading. And one of the reasons they do that is it's built into the market for safety. It's not just a panic thing. So we want to make you aware. This is Radio Westchester broadcasting from the new Rochelle Train Station. We're going to go back to our regular guest, who is Pauline Harris, and she is currently with Choice of New York. She's in case management services as an assistant outpatient treatment manager. She deals with people who have been court-ordered to take their medication because they suffer from various mental illnesses. And again, we were talking about some of the cases that she handled, and we were specifically talking about those mood disorders. Now, that person's going to have insight once they're taking their meds. So why would they not want to stay on their meds? Besides not having that confident feeling, because as someone who knows the depressive part, and again, it's not my purpose to do this here, but since you're the doctor and I was once a patient, I can tell you that if you offered me, and this is, I want to know how you deal with this, because I wasn't manic, or maybe it would have been better. If you said to me, Bob, right now I'm going to break every bone in your body, or I'm going to let you suffer from the worst of your depression for that same week, you can go ahead and break every bone. It's that horrible. So I should imagine that when someone's in the manic phase, at least they don't feel that.
They don't.
Okay, so how do you get that person to take their meds, to remind them of the other half?
Unfortunately, that's when you have to hospitalize them, because when they're home and they're dealing with that, they're so far removed from the reality
When they're manic.
when they're manic,
Okay.
that they don't understand, nor do they want to acknowledge that their behaviors are affecting their life.
Well, why would I? Yeah.
Exactly. And for them, again, it goes back to they have control in their head.
Well, in that moment they do.
Yes.
I can account, and sometimes they often do. Famously, it was the owner of the New York, the Washington Post. He later turned the business over to Mrs. Graham, but he was a brilliant newspaper editor who was manic depressive, and he lost it towards the end of his life. I'm paraphrasing it, but he ran away with an 18-year-old and wound up killing himself and all of that because he stopped taking his meds. So it can be any age group,
Oh, yes, definitely.
So you've got to fight that. But do you have success with those? I should think you might.
I do.
If you get them medicated
I do.
properly.
Once I get them medicated and
a whole
get them to
family of new
understand-
drugs.
to understand what's going on and how it's affecting their life, it's a very great feeling when they are confident enough to allow the medication to work for them. Some of them don't feel that way, but majority of them do, because it allows them to be able to be more sociable and, hold productive relationships and work a decent job without their behaviors dictating how things are going to go.
My goodness. What an interesting job, but also what a difficult one. personality disorders, which are almost baked in, and we mentioned, of course, borderline personality and developmental disorders. Those are tough nuts to crack because sometimes, particularly with a personality disorder, I don't even know, and you might. Do medications help?
I don't know. I don't know if it helps or if it slows down the ability for them to figure out exactly where they want to be at that particular time. Because sometimes the personality disorder is not really the person, it's more of the need.
Well, and the anger, and when they're angry, they have no insight into it.
No.
They feel
The
there's this
anger
rage
takes
that
over.
goes back to when they were abused.
Yeah. They play so many different scenarios in their brain, and it's hard for them to walk away with an understanding of, that was there, that's before, this is now. Once the anger kicks in, it's really based on them and how long it takes for them to come out of that.
Now, how
world.
often does the borderline person also develop secondary problems and neuroses, other things?
A lot.
And so now you've
It's
got,
often.
So now you may have to deal with that part with the medication. These are very complex, and that's the point I'm
Yes.
trying to get at, that you're dealing with, which brings us to another one that's, I don't want to use the word intractable, but developmental disabilities start out real young and they perpetuate through life. What can you do for them? Because sometimes even with the best of medications, you still have a lot to deal with.
Sometimes it's encouragement. You encourage them to be their best. You let them know that when they're developmentally disabled, they feel different.
Yes.
And you
and
just
they do a lot do have insight too.
Exactly. And you validate them, and let them know that it's okay to be different. Everyone is not going to be the same, and you're allowed to be different. It's, you are who you are. You love yourself. It's all about the encouragement and the building them up to make them feel comfortable to, want to expose their disability. Because when at an adult age, when, they're developmentally disabled, that's when the depression comes in, because they don't want to go outside around people because they feel like they're being looked at differently or they're strange. So you try to encourage them, and you let them know, hey, you're beautiful, it's okay, and no one sees you differently.
Wow, we can go on and on with this. In fact, I know that I am. It's already 8:46 and the time flies. You obviously love what you do.
I do.
What's the most rewarding part of the job?
The most rewarding part is when I talk with a client and they open up to me and they're able to tell me, because I'll propose the question, how did you end up on AOT? And then they'll go into their story, and when they get to the end of the story and they say, well, now that I take my medication, I don't act like that.
Is there a common thread?
Society.
Say more.
Because of things not being of society's norm, it can hinder the growth of someone who's dealing with a mental disability, because whereas they want to acknowledge and they want to experience life on everyone else's terms, but because they lack the ability to control every aspect of their life, coming out into society who lacks the education on how to deal with them makes it hard for them to open up. So they become very sheltered.
I want to cover one other thing, and then we'll get back to how you react to it, Pauline Harris. One of the things that needs to be factored in here is you probably deal with some people who otherwise might be and may still have a proclivity to be violent. What is generally the common thread there in terms of mental illnesses? Because if they've been court-ordered in some cases, they acted out maybe in a violent way or in a way that broke the law. Where does the violence come from? Because it has to be a mix of society. In other words, I've always said, kind of flippant on the air, but I do say this. How come when someone acts out or becomes a schizophrenic, instead of shooting someone, not that all schizophrenics do. In fact, I'm sure that's not the common thread, but it'll say, well, the guy was insane. Okay, why not just throw Easter eggs out the window of an airplane as opposed to hurt someone else? Where's the violence come from?
The anger within.
The flight and fight?
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
They feel, I think that they feel, I'm hurting and no one's helping me. And I would rather someone be feeling the same way I'm feeling so that maybe they understand and they can help me. So it's either I shelter myself and I go into hiding, which is the flight to get away from things, or the fight, whereas I'll become physical, and sometimes it's not even a physical aggression that is displayed.
It may just be anger.
It could just
cursing,
be verbal.
Yeah.
It could be just body language where they, have a bad habit of just walking into people without using the word excuse me. So
that's interesting. I had that happen once. My grandson often tells me about the time we were in Manhattan. I took him to a hockey game. He was like 9. The person was homeless, but not terribly hobo-ish looking.
Right.
I put my fingers up for quotes, folks. And he was dead set on walking right into my grandson on purpose. And we got into a verbal altercation, and my grandson, why'd you yell at that man? And I said, why was he doing that? That's that wanted somebody else to hurt?
It's that, and it was the attention seeking. It's, okay, I'm going to cause a disruption over here, and they're going to pay attention to me. And for the one time in my own brain, someone's watching me. And not in a bad way, because they don't see it as a bad way. They grabbed your attention.
Yeah, they sure
were
did. He
able
got
to
my
pull you in.
attention. Yeah,
Exactly.
He sure did. That's fascinating. Now, what you've described and what you've reacted to these, as I said, snowballs I'm throwing at you to field, yours can be a very dark place where you work, but you find the good in it. How do you keep, because as anyone who deals with mental illness, either professionally or as a patient, knows there's a certain amount of hopelessness in it. How do you keep that from affecting you?
I talk. I have kids. I have 4 beautiful children.
You have 4 children?
4 beautiful children.
Young
and
woman.
A handsome grandson.
Oh, aren't grandkids the best? See that hockey? Oh, see the hockey player in the red shirt up there? That's my grandson.
I have to say, since he's been born and he's a year.
Isn't it the greatest thing? Is there anything better?
Nothing.
There's a guy,
it's
a regular
such a
listening
different
to
love.
the show. Yeah, it's ridiculous, isn't it? Did you think it would be? I used to think it would be somewhere between a pet and my own kids.
That's what I at first I was like, okay, it's the grandson. More money I have to shell out. Oh boy.
Right. And that you do.
Oh, definitely.
I need
but I want to.
Yeah,
because
you ain't kidding. You are not
I'll
kidding.
give him the world if I
could.
could.
Isn't it the greatest
Yes.
thing? It's ridiculous. I remember telling a regular caller, and actually become a good friend too, this guy Anthony, when he was going to have a grandkid. Now he's got 2. I said, you just don't know.
I have no idea what he's getting himself into.
And now he's ridiculous.
Of
He's like a
course.
big mush ball.
That's what my kids say about me.
Yeah.
I'm mushy. I have a daughter, my oldest daughter, who's in the same field. She is a case manager with the homeless.
Wow.
So every now and again, without divulging names of clients, we share stories.
Oh, of course.
Just to get it off, to vent it out, so it doesn't overcome me as a person or her as a person. And we try to sit down together and work out ways of how we could help more than within our job.
And what I should think, again, I don't do what you do, but one of the things you learn, even if you've been on the other end as a patient, every good day is a good day. You put it in the bank.
Yes.
So if you've got someone who's maintaining, even if it doesn't always have a perfect outcome, the fact that you help them today is a lot. Because the whole key to all this is a day at a time, isn't it?
Yes, it's a day, one day at a time. So if I can get you through your treatment program and accompany you back to your residence and actually visually see you take your afternoon medication, I know at least you're on the right track to some success.
Does it help if these people have a family?
It helps tremendously. But I'm going to put a but to that, because having a family that accepts you is what the help is. You have some people who have families that don't accept the fact that their family member is dealing with the mental illness, or they understand, they know they're dealing with it, but they don't understand what's going on, so they treat them differently. And
I'm going to go to a funny place. One of the things I've noticed about the upper crust in society, they really have an aversion to the mentally ill in their families.
yes.
from not inviting them over for holidays, for pretending they don't exist, for hoping that they could institutionalize them permanently,
Yes.
to getting third parties to give them their medication
Yes.
and not see them.
And not deal with them at all.
And what they don't realize is maybe if they just hugged the person and said, I love you, it might make the biggest difference in the world. Am I on to something
You're
there?
on to everything right now, because sometimes it's not even just people with mental illness that
Well,
need that
yeah,
hug.
no, shoot.
You can be someone regular that lives a regular life. And every now and again, you find yourself doubting some things in your life. And just a hug from someone or a hello from a stranger can, bring sunshine to your storm.
Well, I see the sunshine in your heart, and you love to help people, but I know also there's another side to what you do. Sometimes tough love's required. Are you
Yes.
able to do that?
Yes, I
And
am.
how would you describe it?
I describe it as dealing with my own child,
Interesting.
because I need them to understand that I care about them, but I'm not going to tolerate certain things. And when you discuss it with them and you inform them of, here are the things that are unacceptable, and we need to work on making things better. And if you can't, then here's the consequences, and I'm going to stand by them. And I let them know, like, no surprises. I'm reporting this to the county, and you need to understand there's going to be a meeting and there's going to be a decision made. How it goes is up to you and how you want this to play out. If you know that what you're doing is unacceptable, let's make some changes. Here's how I can help you.
Okay, let me throw in the last ripple,
Okay.
just so people can see how complicated your job is, but also how interesting if you want to help people. A lot of these people have traditionally, or in many cases, not all of them, self-medicated.
Yes.
They may be drinking, they may be a pill addict, they may be on cocaine, PC, you name it. How common is that? And then how do you get that dealt with as you deal with all this rest of it?
It's very common that some individuals like to self-medicate. And again, it goes back to the control. If they're self-medicating, they have control.
That's interesting.
They are determining what's being done to help them. So the first thing to do is to get them to acknowledge that they're self-medicating. And then you go to the education. Here's what you're using, and here's what you have been prescribed. Here's how they interact. And you give them the pros and cons of the whatever illegal substance they're using, and you give them the pros and cons of the medication.
My goodness.
And you address more of the pros with the medication and more of the cons with the illegal substances, so that they kind of develop the understanding.
And what order do you even attack these things? I remember a good friend of mine who was a shrink always used to say, all things are possible, but the most important thing he used to say is you can't solve all these problems at one time.
No.
What do you go after first?
For me, I go after the illegal drug use first,
I should think, yeah.
because that is what's offsetting their chemical in their brain.
Right.
So if we can get rid of that part of it, then we can start to rebuild that brain to be able to accept the other things that are going on, and then we can work through the mental illness or the physical illness. It all depends on what has the power at that time.
Wow. You now know your conversation with us today and what you're telling us today is one of the reasons we added this hour to morning radio. Is always 8 minutes, next thing, 8 minutes, next thing, 12 minutes. But we added 1 hour because some subjects need to be put under a microscope. And you're demonstrating why we appreciate and listeners appreciate this
Thank
hour
you.
so much. What's the most painful part of the job?
Visiting the clients in the hospital for me.
When you first get the call?
After,
Oh.
when they're rehospitalized.
Oh,
The first initial, when I get the call to go to the hospital, it's like, okay, let's figure out a way to stay out of here. But then you have some clients who can't get out of their own head.
don't even, you can
So
bring
they go
tears to my
back
eyes when you
to-
say that.
They go back to the hospital, and then when I meet with them in the hospital, after a week or so, and they get their medication, and they ask me, well, Pauline, why am I here again? And then I have to go back over the story of, what they were doing and, what prompted this hospitalization. And then the conversation that takes place afterwards is heartwarming. It's, I don't want to do this, and I don't want to be a part of this.
Well, look at what
and-
you're saying. That's the worst part, but now you're telling me it's a rewarding part as well.
Yeah, it goes. It's cut from a double-edged sword. It's, you go in and you feel so bad for that person because they don't understand why they're there.
And even if and if they're on the depressive end of the spectrum,
It takes a while.
they do, and it's so horrible.
And some of them, when they are depressed like that, going to the hospital is a benefit for them
Yeah, for a moment.
for a moment,
For
and
a
then
moment,
after a couple of days, or once the medication.
You know, I'll share one more thing from my experience. I put it in the book, but it also this enables me to ask the kind of questions that I ask. My doctor, when I got sick, had a tough decision to make, and it wasn't until I wrote the book that I asked him, maybe at the end of treatment, many years later. And I said, "Why didn't you put me in the hospital?" And there was a very insightful answer, because I had no confidence. I was phobic, socially phobic, agoraphobic, massive anxiety. If you told me I had a different name, I'd have believed you.
Okay.
And I said, "Why didn't you hospitalize me?" And it was during when I had to lie. I had to tell people I had something else wrong with me. And he said, "Because I felt," he says, "it was a tough decision, but I felt that the only way you were ever going to develop confidence as a person was to hang by your fingernails and make it." Isn't that interesting?
That is interesting.
And you must deal with that every day.
Yeah.
All right, so let's. I want to wrap up focusing on you. You obviously love this. It's
do.
complicated. It's difficult. It's an uphill climb. I asked you what hurts. What gives you pleasure in this job? What gives you satisfaction?
Talking to the clients and hearing how they made progress. Their progress gives me satisfaction. Being able to go from being hospitalized 5 times to, "Hey, Pauline, I start work on Tuesday."
No,
Yeah.
that's got to be great.
So that's the best feeling. I had a client who dealt really bad with depression, so he kept himself indoors, and then again, got him started getting him come outside and everything, and eventually he told me, "I got a job and I love my job." And that made me feel so good to
Makes
know
me feel
that
good to hear it.
he was able to get out of his own head.
Yeah. You mentioned that 2 or 3 times.
Because that's,
For people who have depression, that is beyond difficult.
yes.
Beyond difficult.
So when you're able to do that, you are now successful within yourself.
Do you know, I got to share this with you. I just do, even if we went a little over, because of what you do. And I'm saying this for the benefit of people listening who may use choice services or who suffer from depression themselves. I often give talks about it, with my own experience with it. And one of the things I don't do is sugarcoat it.
Right.
They say, "Oh, look, you're fine now, and it's wonderful." Oh my God, they have no. Now, and I'll give you one anecdote. Although this may get me in trouble at home, but now naturally, like most men, straight men, if I fantasize, I'm fantasizing about a beautiful woman or a relationship, or at least I go down that line only by contrast. I fantasize about other things, scoring 1,000,000 hockey goals and winning the
course.
lottery. But during the depth of my illness, I literally would fantasize about, why won't someone just give me shock therapy so that it'll stop?
Because you wanted to get out of your own head.
But I couldn't.
Right.
Just go ahead, put some electrodes on me, and just make it stop for a minute. And when I tell that to people, they can't relate to it. But I'm sure you
I
can.
do. I
Yeah.
understand.
So you do God's work. It's an amazing thing that you do. Where are you headed with all this? And again, I have to tell you who this magical woman is. Pauline Harris. She is at Choice, and this is every Thursday at 9:00. We have our Choice Hour. She's an assistant. You're only an assistant outpatient treatment manager, and she deals with the people who are court ordered to have mental health. She's worked with the Department of Special Ed and so forth, and obviously works with social services here in Westchester. Ultimately, where are you going to take this? What do you want to do?
I want to do this.
You do, don't you?
Yeah, I do.
Um,
And
go ahead.
working here with Choice, it's opened my eyes to more than what I expected. When I first took the job, I didn't know that it was, going to be so intensive and so hands-on. But I'm glad that I did because it opened the door for me to be able to do everything that I've ever wanted to do, and that was help people.
You have demonstrated today one of the reasons why I joined their board. Because of what you do, the kind of work that you do. Is the stigma still there? I mean, do people have to lie when they go to work anymore about their depression or their schizophrenia, whatever the case may be?
I don't think they have to lie, but I think people are just fearful of not, admitting to what they're going through, fear of perception.
Mm-hmm.
So the best thing is to not fear of who you are. Be yourself at all times and allow people to accept you for shortcomings, longcomings, all your comings, whatever it is with you.
I can tell you the depressed person believes that they'll never be forgiven for anything.
Right.
Isn't that the truth?
But they need to understand they will be loved eventually.
Pauline Harris, I don't know the factory where they make you, but hopefully they'll print a few more.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you for very, very much for being here. Again, folks, full
Thank you
disclosure,
for
I'm on the
having me,
board of
Bob.
choice.
It's wonderful.
What a wonderful job you do.
Thank you.
God bless you. Keep doing this for people, please.
Thank you.
As you can tell from some of my reactions, the pain that they go through is unimaginable for most people.
Yes.
Thanks.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Pauline Harris from Choice, everybody. Wow. All right, we got to slam the lid on things for today. I don't get moved too much during interviews, so now I got to get a hold of myself and do this news story. We know that the trading has been stopped, and we're going to try before we go right now. In fact, I'm even just looking on my phone rather than turn around on my computer and be rude. Thank you, Pauline. Travel safely.
Thank you.
Stay healthy. All righty, let's see what we got. All right. Let's see what's happening. This is Radio Westchester. I want to thank you for listening today. Of course, tomorrow's Friday, and we have a great lineup of guests, as we always do, although we may change things appropriately. We'll let you know. All right, trading was briefly, it's back up again. Trading briefly halted for the second time this week as stock drops following President Trump's speech. Two major cruise lines have now shut down, and the European Union leaders disapprove of U.S. travel restrictions. Pence says, quote, I don't think there's confusion after clarifications to the address. And yes, there were clarifications that needed to be made. There always are. So don't hang this on the president's speech per se, but just the knowledge that we're taking steps. But the market is back up and trading. We have people to thank, and we shall thank them now. Of course, Vince Russo, Dr. And I want to be sure to get her name right. Dr. Savoy was with us at 8:20. John Bailey, Jake produced a wonderful section with the folks from Ramen. Andy Spano giving us a very serious overview of how he views the virus, and of course Pauline Harris from Choice. So made my day knowing that there are people like that. Stay safe. We're here. Things aren't as bad in New Rochelle as people are making it out to be in the press, or at least the press would have you think. We are alive and well. Thank you for listening. We will see you at 6:30 tomorrow morning. This is Radio Westchester. I'm Bob Marrone. You've been listening to Mornings with Bob.